Good evening. Welcome to this live stream. Newcastle United have been beaten. Start again. This is so rushed. Newcastle United have drawn 0-0 at Everton. Apologies for the lack of notice around this live stream. I've just been finishing work. I'm just trying. It's all very, very rushed. Hence why nobody's in the chat yet. Hopefully, a few people will join. But Newcastle United beaten, for the benefit of everyone who's watching on catch up. Newcastle United. I'll start again. This has been horrendous. Newcastle United have drawn 0-0 with Everton at Goodison Park in a really difficult game to take, I think, because of the manner of it, with Newcastle getting the penalty and that obviously missing the penalty, Anthony Gordon missing the penalty, saved by Jordan Pickford. There's so much narrative there on both sides. That's the sort of epicenter of this sort of negativity and bite between Everton and Newcastle in the last few weeks. Again, sorry for the nature of this live stream. I've just finished work. I was on the EFL coverage for the BBC, and then I was also half writing a rugby report on the Falcons getting beaten by Leicester as well. So if once you arrive in the chat, hopefully some people will. Then please do drop some things in the chat as well, and we'll get going. But yeah, just for the benefit of people watching on catch up, and just so it isn't a complete nothingness until anybody turns up, Newcastle, I thought, played a lot better in this performance overall. They were crisper in possession. I think Sandro Tonali had a bit of a difficult game, but they were crisper in possession. They were better at dealing with what the game was going to throw at them overall, I think, generally. And then after that, it felt like Newcastle were in a position where they should have capitalised on things. They should have, Everton. I think Jamie Carragher said in commentary that Everton are one of those teams that if you don't put the game to bed, they can always hang around. They try and stay in the game and nick it with a set piece or a goal. And Everton had a few chances as well themselves, but this was down to Newcastle not taking their opportunities, not making the most of what they had. If there's anybody in the chat, please do drop some things in the in the stream. Do drop some things on the chat, and also like the stream as well to help it boost and get it, because I obviously haven't done a very good job at marketing it coming into this. So yeah, please do drop some thoughts into the chat. And we'll get going, because otherwise I'm just rambling to myself. But yeah, Newcastle were not in a position really to. They weren't as bad as they were at Fulham or even at Wolves. Actually, I think they were actually better overall, but they didn't take their opportunities. Joe Linton got in down the left a couple of times, and I leave this game sort of feeling quite frustrated with how I sort of saw the game going. I think Newcastle lacked that focal point in the middle. Gordon playing as a striker just doesn't work when Newcastle have so much of the ball and they're trying to break down a team. And also, Joe Linton was a bigger threat when he moved to the left, and that second half, it got him away from the possession, sort of playing with the ball and having there's a couple of misplaced passes earlier on in the game. When he moved to the left, he was much more threatening up against their right back, and I think that I kind of feel a little bit there's a little bit of justification for the fact that Newcastle were for the fact that I said that Newcastle should go with a strike force that included Will Asul down the middle to offer a focal point, and Joe Linton on the left. Gordon had a difficult game. Overall, I think he actually did better, but it won't go down as a positive game for him, will it? Let's be fair, because of the penalty miss, because of the narrative, and because of everything around that. But yeah, I just if let me know what you think. For me, it was a poor performance in terms of what they could have achieved, but ultimately they didn't lose the game. It's another game unbeaten. And against last season when they lost 3-0 at Everton, and it was one of those sucker punch games where they were kind of in it, but not as dominant, not as good in possessions. I think they were at times tonight. And then they got sucker punched at the end with a couple of mistakes. That didn't happen tonight. That's a positive, but ultimately not a great not a great performance overall. Hopefully, some people join this. Otherwise, it'll just be a something for everybody to watch back on later. And let me know what you think. But yeah, for me, it's one of those games where you look back and think a team that's trying to achieve what Newcastle are trying to achieve wins that game. You look at Villa. I know they drew with Ipswich, but I would back Villa to win that game in those circumstances. I would have backed Chelsea to win that game in those circumstances, and I think that's a really important point. Few people are now joining. Please do drop something in the chat because I'm just talking to myself, and I have been for 5 minutes, so I need something to bounce off. So please drop something in the chat. Now that a few people are starting to join, which is good. But yeah, it was a performance when that I think Newcastle will. I said before the game in the preview that I thought this game would be a crossroads moment for Newcastle and where they go with their season. What happens with their season this, in terms of what happens next, and I feel like that's not quite as clear cut as it would have been if they'd won or lost. I think their performance was good, and it was, in a sense, it was building on the Man City game. They were confident in possession. They were pressing a bit better. They did harry and they did push. But I think it was as the first comment from RG Fox has said, it's a stifled. Litless performance over many years, and good and bad NUFC squads a point away from home is excellent. Yeah, I think that ultimately you can isolate this. I think you can take two different views of this. The performance was good, and there was a missed opportunity, but quite a few Newcastle teams in the past would have folded there, wouldn't they? I think that's a really good point. By the way, if you are in the stream, please like it because it will help boost it for other people to join. And also, yeah, add some more comments into the chat because I think the game kind of went the way I thought it would. Ultimately, it was just down to whether Newcastle would take their chances, and they didn't do that, unfortunately. And this is it's definitely a missed opportunity. While I agree with the comment from RG Fox, it's a missed opportunity. They should have been able to put this game to bed. And I would suggest that a lot of the teams that Newcastle will be battling for the top 4 with or top 6 with this season would have put Everton away in those circumstances. They lacked the focal point. Yes. Lacking Isak and Wilson, that's always going to have an impact on the squad. But there was enough in that team and enough in the performance, I thought, to warrant and enough of those opportunities to edge the game in their favour, and they didn't do enough of that. Once a few people more people join, then we'll get into a bit more detail on the performance. But I thought. There were a couple of disappointing performances. Murphy, it's easy to come into these live streams straight after and talking straight after a game and think that and say that say sort of big general permanent sort of massive sweeping statements, but Murphy is increasingly looking like he isn't of the level. I mean, we know this. He shouldn't be starting, but when he plays for Newcastle, there's a significant drop in output. I think he tries hard. He's energetic. He does everything he can. But I just think when he plays in that team on that right hand side, Newcastle are weaker. And it comes back again. We don't want to talk about transfers and recruitment and all this in general terms, but the right wing position is the only position that hasn't been strengthened considerably since the takeover happened. And somebody previously, when I said this on one of these live streams, pointed out, or one of these videos, pointed out that Fabian Schär and the right centre back is also a position that hasn't been solved, and that is true. But I would argue that Schär is definitely good enough to play in this team. It's just the fact that he's getting older and he lacks a bit of pace that's his issue. Whereas Almiron and Murphy both are not good enough to play on that right hand side for Newcastle United and where they're trying to go. And I think that's kind of ultimately where this issue is arising. I thought it was. RG Fox says, I personally thought the lads, if the lads got a penalty, Eddie would have said it would be taken by Fabian Schär as he's an outsider, will remove from the Toffees connection sort of side. Yeah, I think it's easy. The thing about this is I can't disagree, because obviously Gordon's performance, that miss in the second half as well, it was one of those, and we see it all the time. We see it when Jordan Pickford came to St James's Park the first time with Everton in 2018 when he had a meltdown and Newcastle came back from 3 to win 3-2 in that game, and he was offering fans out for fights after the game. It was in front of me. It was crazy. That sort of level of it wasn't that same sort of thing for Gordon, but there was an obvious feeling that the game got to him today. That missing the second half, as I say, that the fans and the occasion got to him, and then that. With that in mind, looking back, it's easy to say that that Fabian Schär should have taken the penalty, or somebody else should have taken the penalty at the very least. It's easy to say that now. I mean, at the time, the group chat a couple of the group chats that I was in when the penalty was given, they were really keen to see Gordon take it to score the penalty, to stick it to Everton, stick it to Pickford, but. Obviously, it's difficult to disagree that the game got to him. So looking back, it was a mistake for him to take that penalty, and he didn't look like he had the same sort of process that he was going through. He looked really, really confident against Man City, and then his interview after the game for TNT Sports, when he was asked about his penalty process, he felt like you understood why him and other England players have become really, really confident from the spot. Like he was talking through going through his process. It didn't look like he went through any of that. It looked rushed. He telegraphed it. Pickford went early and still got there. That tells you quite a lot. And it was a poor penalty. There are a few guys in the chat now. Please do like the stream and put some more comments into the chat, and let me know your thoughts. Who was your man of the match? Who did you think played poorly? I've just said I thought Murphy wasn't great. Almiron came on and did a little bit better. Maybe that'll change the perception for what's coming in the next few weeks in terms of where Newcastle go in terms of who plays on the right against Brighton in a couple of weeks. Obviously, maybe it's a time to take stock of the season so far. Now it's the second international break. The season doesn't really feel like it's starting anymore. Feels like it's starting to get going a bit more. So where do you stand on Newcastle as a whole? How have you? How pleased are you? What's the difficulty that you see with the team so far? How do you feel generally about Newcastle? But after today's performance, I thought it was a real disappointing result, because they should have done enough to win. RG Fox come back. Talk sports so much about psychology, fitness, and technique. Why put a young and under pressure against his former club and give the crowd a boost? Give the crowd a boost if saved. Alan says, I think a lot of fans will be disappointed. It's a massive opportunity lost for 3 points. How many points are we going to get against Arsenal, Liverpool, Man City, Villa away? Yeah, I think that's kind of it. But I mean, there's two ways of looking at it. Like the year that Newcastle finished fourth at this stage, they weren't doing any, but they were doing actually a lot worse away from home. They dropped more points at home against in St James's Park as well. So they would, from that perspective, they can easily build on this position that they're in. It's far from a terrible position, but I do agree with Alan there completely. Like I feel like there's a sense of what should have been today. This is and I come back to what I said at the start when I started the stream. Villa go there and win, in my opinion, in this game, in these circumstances. Chelsea go there and win in these circumstances. Obviously, Liverpool, Arsenal, Man City would win in those circumstances. But crucially, teams that I would even say Tottenham probably win in those circumstances as well. And yes, you can say that no, Isak has an impact, but Newcastle are doomed if they just can't win a game when Isak isn't there, and they need to find different ways of doing it. And it's a difficult one to I do understand what RG Fox has said about looking back about the psychology of giving Gordon that penalty, but Gordon scored his last one. Is a confident lad, and I think everyone would have backed him. It's easy. It's easy to say that perhaps it was the wrong decision. If you are in the chat, please do like the stream. As I say, it does boost the put a thumbs up on the stream because it does boost it and helps attract other people to come and watch it. We'll stick around till about 9 o'clock to dissect the game, but one thing I will say, I said that I thought that Newcastle were they did what I thought they would do and the game went as I thought it would in the attacking sense, with Joe Linton should have been playing on the left and the lack of a focal point cost them. But I also thought Sandro Tonali was disappointing tonight. It was a poor performance for him overall. He wasn't as effective in possession as he has been, wasn't as penetrative as he has been in recent weeks, and that was disappointing. It didn't really help Newcastle's tempo too much. I will also preface this by saying, as I said at the top of the stream, I was watching the game, but it wasn't my main focus because I was at work. We can't put Newcastle in the same bracket as Chelsea, City, and Gunners, Liverpool. We're nowhere near at that level at present. Potentially that is the case, but at the same time, that's what Newcastle need to progress. That's what they need. If they don't reach that level this season, then it's quite perilous for what happens next, because a lot of the key members of this squad need to be playing in Europe and need to be playing in the Champions League. So they need to be playing like a team that does that. And if we just accept that Newcastle are nowhere near that level, then what does that say for the future of the team? Because even though they had a disappointing summer in the summer transfer window, this was supposed to be the season where they regrouped, pushed again to challenge those teams. So if they're not at that level, and and obviously it's difficult to say that they are because the performance levels haven't been that good this season. And as I say, Chelsea look more impressive than a lot of people thought. Certainly, I did at this stage, and Villa as well. In there, that's if Newcastle aren't challenging those teams, then they're in for a really, really difficult next couple of years, because at this point, that's the expectation. Regardless of what's happening, off the pitch and all those things, they need to be challenging. So it's difficult to disagree with on the basis of these performances, but ultimately they have to see themselves as maybe not Chelsea, Arsenal, and Liverpool, Arsenal, Man City. I think they're a step above everybody else, but everyone in the bracket below, Spurs, Man United, Villa, Chelsea, those are the teams that Newcastle have to see themselves as next to, because if they don't, then what does it mean for the next phase? Because this was the season that they were supposed to be in that bracket. They overachieved 2 years ago. They slightly underachieved or achieved par in the end after a difficult season with injuries. This was the season they were supposed to be kicking on, and when you kick on, if you're going to kick on in these circumstances, you need to be winning these games. And as I say, it was the type of performance where I think it's one of those games where we're all reacting to it differently. If Gordon scores the penalty, and Newcastle win the game, we're all saying how great it was that they ground out this result and they dominated the ball and got the win, and they created more chances and scored and got the win. But the fact that they didn't put any of the other chances, because it isn't just the penalty, it was also Joe Linton getting in down the right a couple of times, crossing and not finding anybody. It was Bruno's chance in the second half. In the second half, where he skied it over the bar. It was Anthony Gordon as well going through a one-on-one, skying it over the bar. These were chances as well that should have been put away. So, that's just the way it has to. You have to be this. Those are the margins at this level. and Newcastle have come away with this poor result. Alan's asking says the positive. It must be our performance was better overall, and hopefully Wilson will get out of the sick bed and Isak and Miley within 2 weeks. I can't remember. As I say, I've been really busy in the last couple of weeks. Don't have it to hand, but Eddie Howe did comment on the fact that he was hoping both. I think Wilson and Isak will be back using the next couple of weeks as a good chance to recover. Isak isn't going away with Sweden, which is positive in a sense for Newcastle. Hopefully that'll mean that he's in better shape for Brighton. But yeah, it feels like it definitely feels like Newcastle need another striker, and it would have, or at least need to there's a gap between Asula and the level that he needs to be at as well, which doesn't help. But what I'm saying is I've never believed that. I've said, if you go back on my videos, I've said for quite a while, I don't believe that Gordon as a central striker works, primarily because teams want Newcastle to dominate the ball, or Newcastle want to dominate the ball, but teams are allowing them to do that. It was fine against Man City when they were relying on springing traps and turning the ball over, and there was more space for Gordon to attack and more reason for him to press from the front. That worked better than it did tonight. He looked back to being isolated. The ball was going into the middle. It was coming straight back out again because he was getting beaten to it by Tarkowski and Keane, who had quite a decent game, but they didn't have too much pressure on them. I would have reacted a little bit. I would have reacted a little bit earlier in changing the emphasis of the game, trying to stretch the game earlier, try to stretch the game a bit more and getting out wide. Thought Almiron did okay in the second half, but mainly Joe Linton should have been on the left from the start, in my opinion. Yeah, this is a difficult performance, but I think taking stock, the fact that Newcastle have not been at their best all season and are crucially starting to look like they've got a little bit more of their old selves. They was better in possession today. They were better at getting around the back. They were better at creating chances than they certainly were against Fulham, and even I would argue Wolves. I think this was probably a better performance than against Wolves, even though the result was worse. The fact that they didn't put the game to bed is a bit concerning. When I don't think there wasn't enough on the pitch to win this game, because they created enough chances, and Gordon should score that one that he goes through on. Bruno should score the one that he balloons over the bar. Like that doesn't, that the fact that Isak is missing is not the reason why Newcastle didn't win this game. And actually, the other point to Alan just said that Gordon isn't a striker. The other point there is that actually there were glimpses, and I know this sort of contradicts what I've just said about Joe Linton, but there were instances. I thought, again, I wasn't fully watching the game as much as many other people probably were, but Gordon went out on the left and looked a lot more lively, got a lot more out of the game, tracked back a bit better, seemed to be working a little bit more comfortably. He was just overshadowed in the when he was central, and it doesn't feel like Newcastle have a good way of working when he isn't down the middle, as I say. Sorry, when he is down the middle. Alan says his fear was before the game that we started we wouldn't score. Yeah, that's ultimately that's the issue. Like, my argument for having Will Asula play up front for Newcastle in these Premier League games isn't because I think Will Asula is ready, or isn't necessarily because I think Will Asula will score goals that Gordon won't. But I think at least what Will Asula will bring is consistency, with allowing Newcastle to play round him better and having a bit more of a foothold in the battle in the box that they just don't when Gordon isn't there. But the issue with Gordon in the middle is it's twofold, because one, there's a lack of any presence in the centre, but you also take Newcastle's best attacker when he's at his best away from his strongest position on the left. to put him in the middle where it just doesn't work. So I would, as I say, I think for me, the issue being the issue with Asula is not a style thing. So I would throw him in that personally. But again, let me know what you think as well on that front. We'll look at as I say, I think it was good that Nick Pope was fit. Obviously, there was a little slight doubt about him from a couple of days ago. Obviously, he didn't play against Wimbledon, and Eddie Howe sort of said that he was hoping he'd be fit for that, so it wasn't a guarantee. Good that he was good that Trippier was fit. Trippier did struggle in possession again. I think he was beaten a couple of times, and I've seen quite a lot of sort of bring Livramento in for Trippier when actually, I don't know if there's a bigger issue there between neither looks 100% comfortable. It was Trippier's worst game of the season, but for me tonight. But it doesn't mean that he needs to be replaced, because I think Newcastle, generally speaking, is still a better team when he's in the team. And I think that Livramento isn't yet the answer that we thought he was. Doesn't mean he won't be, and he obviously that's the plan. But he hasn't, as a number one option at right back, he hasn't stepped into that role as well as I'd hoped he would yet. So there's that. But yeah, it feels like that in terms of Trippier. It was a difficult performance for him. Schär and Byrne were fine. I didn't think Everton really caused too many issues. There was one hospital pass in the first half from Trippier that Calvert-Lewin got the best of. I think it was Schär in the first half, which saw him get a shot away at Pope, which didn't trouble Pope. That was the best that I really saw Everton really create in terms of, obviously they had a goal disallowed for offside as well. But yeah, it wasn't the best. It wasn't the best from Everton in terms of, wasn't the biggest threat from Everton in terms of their attacking team. So Newcastle had that we knew how the game was going to go. They could have really dominated the in terms of creating chances and reaching a higher intensity level, and it felt like they laboured as the game went on, when really they should have been getting a little bit more agitated, more energetic, more up in their tempo, and it kind of went the opposite way. So overall frustrating night, and I think that Anthony Gordon missing that penalty is a massive shame. He's not the kind of guy who will be majorly affected by his by a lack of, in terms of lack of confidence. I don't think that'll be a long-term thing. He's obviously had a difficult start to the season. I do think there's far too much talk of narrative around him. Every single thing that seems to happen with Gordon, it's sort of taken as this whole big thing, when actually I'm not sure it ever feels like it's that deep. Like this season, like last season he was in great form. Then this season it's because he wants to move to Liverpool and he's down. Some people are saying he's downing tools, and then suddenly he's really once he gets his contract sorted around the Man City game, he's back to his best, and that's fine. I just think it's the first season that Anthony Gordon has the first season while at Newcastle, Anthony Gordon's needed a rest and had a rest, and then come back and try to find his level again. Last summer he was at the Euros and the under-21 Euros, had a week off, came back and just hit the ground running. And the fact that he then went to the Euros meant that I think it was always difficult for him to do that again. He needed a break. Once he had that break, he lost his momentum, and he hasn't quite yet found it, because obviously he's been a couple of weeks behind in terms of pre-season levels. And so I think that's more the reason why Gordon's had some difficulty this season. I don't think any of that's got to do with today. I think it was a bit more of an occasion getting to him. I think you've seen it so many times when players, ex-players come back to the club that they support, or their former club, or a club that, a rival club. Obviously, you could argue it's a bit of both for Gordon as an ex-Everton player, but a Liverpool fan, and him getting booed. It's a big occasion for him, and he fluffed his lines because you could sense that the fans were getting to him. And I think that happened also 2 seasons ago. Sorry, last season, when he didn't have his best game, and it was ironically it was most talked about when he went there and Newcastle won 4-1, and he came off the bench in the second half of that game in his first half season at Newcastle. And I remember being in the pre-match press conference for that game, and Eddie Howe was asked about how he would manage Gordon, and the fact that he was talking about how the emotions were going to get to him. It feels like that's still the case for him. Alan says, I'm spot on about the top 4. We're fighting with Chelsea, Villa, Tottenham, Brighton for top 4 at the moment, but Villa and Chelsea look super strong at the moment. Thoughts? Yeah, I agree. I think ultimately that's my big worry, is that as much as it was said earlier that Newcastle don't look like they're on that level, they should be and they need to be, because if they're not, then there's some big questions about, you've seen that they need things like Champions League for revenue. That's how clubs cement themselves as big clubs. They get bigger deals because they're in the Champions League, but also the Champions League money. So from a business perspective, the Champions League is absolutely crucial. But also from a footballing perspective and an optics perspective, they need to be in a position to win this, to do this. And the fact that they, as I say, other teams, like Brighton played Everton off the park on the opening day, in the trying, effectively doing what Everton allowed them to do, what they did. Newcastle were given that same opportunity, didn't take the chance. I would say that Chelsea, as I say, Chelsea would have won that game comfortably. Villa as well, and that's what, as much as it is the case that Newcastle aren't at that level, it's also crucial that they really need to be, because if they're not, then Newcastle are in a really difficult position, because I think lots of people have, players like Isak and Bruno and Gordon have put a lot of faith in this project, and particularly Bruno arriving here when Newcastle were in the relegation zone in 2021. 2020, January 2022. Sorry. He bought into this project, and while it's delivered Champions League football for him once, it needs to do so again. Otherwise, then there's a lot of. I think Newcastle will face some sort of difficult choices in the future. That's why they need to be winning these games. But at the same time, as I say, they drew with Bournemouth two seasons ago. They were drawing with. There was a point. Their season didn't really start till around this time 2 seasons ago, where they struggled away from home. Obviously, lost to Liverpool in late August. Drew at Wolves. Drew at home to Bournemouth, at home to Palace. They were really sort of in a iffy place going into October. That win at Fulham that they got when Miguel Almiron scored that ridiculous goal and set him on that run of great form, that purple patch that he had. And their autumn was brilliant. And that was when it picked up. So Newcastle are in a stronger position now than they were then. So there's something to build on, definitely. Ian says to Alan, win your home games, draw your away games. It's not a terrible result, but we're lacking the cutting edge at the moment. I fully agree with that completely. Piff will not accept being out of Europe for another season. I agree. I think that's the case. And this is where this whole thing about, not strengthening in the summer and these, I said on one of my previous live streams that it's so difficult not to talk about the sort of more in the sort of deeper rooted issues at Newcastle because everything comes back to it. So like as Alan's just said, needing to win these games, and I do take Ian's point that Ian's point is fair. If you win your home games and don't lose your away games, generally that is a good basis. But ultimately, it's getting more difficult and more crowded at the top. So the ability to not bounce back, to not to bounce back after a failure to win these games is difficult. It's getting more difficult. But to Alan's point, yeah, Newcastle need to be in Europe next season. But the fact that they need to be in Europe means that you then ultimately then you get to naturally scrutinising again what happened in the summer with Paul Mitchell and Eddie Howe, and is it fair to judge Eddie Howe on needing to get into the Champions League this season when he didn't get the players he needed, and what went on there? Obviously, that opens up an entirely different can of worms. But it's so difficult that I think everything, the frustration I have with Newcastle is that all the issues that happened in the summer with recruitment, with what happened in terms of why didn't they strengthen two positions on the pitch? There's a lack of that. They are struggling to deal with what on the pitch. They're struggling to deal with the quality with the lack of quality that they have in those positions. They're being exposed for pace in behind, and they're struggling for creativity, as I mentioned earlier, with Murphy and Almiron on the right. So those are two things that they didn't address in the summer. And then off the pitch, there's still all this sort of like a lack of direction, a lack of cohesion between what they want to achieve. All of this is affecting the start of the season, and that's where I feel like it's most of an issue. I think this is going to be a bit of a shorter live stream because I do want to. I've just finished a long day at work, so I do want to enjoy the evening. But if you do have any other closing thoughts in the next sort of 5-10 minutes, then we'll get to them. Let me know what you think. Continue to like the stream as well if you are in it and you haven't already, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already as well for more Newcastle United content, Newcastle United reaction. We did a live stream on the stadium and the potential to move away from St James's Park yesterday. If you haven't already, please check that out. And yeah, I'm trying to generally grow the channel a little bit more, and I need to get better at advertising these live streams and get more people to look at it. But I tend to just sort of play it by ear as to when I do them, and I don't know, because I'm so busy on a weekend as a journalist, as a sports journalist. Saturday particularly is a very busy day. The fact that this game kicked off a little bit later meant that I felt like I could do it tonight, and it's been great to have a couple of new voices in the chat in terms of Alan and RG Fox. It really does. Please keep clicking like. It does help a lot. Alan says, spot on to Ian's point about winning the home games, hoping that Isak and Wilson stay fit or come back and stay fit. Every time we draw or lose away, it puts a massive pressure on the home form. We must stay in the top six until Christmas. I agree with that, and I think the other thing is that generally throughout my lifetime, that's kind of been the way. Even when Newcastle have been a top side under Bobby Robson, and then earlier under that time when they finished fifth. I said this on a previous show. Generally, they've always been really good at home and really poor away from home. But my issue with the away form is that it means that it's kind of very similar. It feels very similar to what it has been in the past, and it feels like that they don't know. There isn't a way to find a better formula away from home, and why I don't understand why they can't be better away from home. Why they always seem to have the same problems home when they're away from home, and then be so monstrous at home. I think that's a bit of an issue. So tough games coming up, says Ian. If we can stay in touch for the next three, then we'll close it in January, and then the transfer window. Oh God, I think there's a lot. There's another point. There's a lot more pressure on January. I think I've said this before. I like to see January as an opportunistic month, and I think that's what Newcastle viewed it as. Obviously, the first January they needed to strengthen after the takeover to avoid relegation. The second one, it was a very opportunistic thing where they reacted late to get Anthony Gordon in because of Everton's financial situation. Last January, there was a lot of talk of of things happening in January, but it never came to fruition. Then we sort of understood why, because of the summer and what happened with PSR this January, because I think we're back to sort of that needing to strengthen again, like they were 3 years ago, because it's just the lack of the lack of strengthening in the summer's really come back to bite them, as I said earlier. Yeah. Any more thoughts before I look to wrap this up in the next couple of minutes? What do by the way, throughout the international break, there will still be, I don't know if any live streams, because if there's no games, let me know if you have any thoughts on what you're looking for, what you want to see on the channel in terms of Newcastle content. There will be some other content as well coming. I'm looking at starting a new podcast with a friend of mine that I'll be uploading onto the channel, so hopefully you can enjoy that as well. But yeah, continue to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. If you're watching this back on catch up, please drop some comments into the video once it becomes like a normal video. We can interact there as well. Let me know what you thought about the game. How do you feel about the season generally as well? Going forward into the second international break, on the other side of that, it's a very difficult game at St James's Park. Thanks very much for joining me again, and I'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.